are listening to Para X.
Burns within your soul. I am the holy light that fills and makes you whole. I am the flame within that never dies. I am the sun that will ever arise. Power of the sun, honor you this night. Leap across the fire, keep all spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight. I am the fire that clears away the old. I am the holy light that guides you to your soul. I am the flame of love for which you yearn. I am the sun that will always return. Power of the sun, honor you this night. Leap across the fire, keep all spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight. I am the fire that burns within your soul. I am the holy light that fills and makes you whole. I am the flame within that never dies. I am the sun that will ever arise. Power of the sun, honor you this night. Leap across the fire to keep all spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight. I am the fire that clears away the old. I am the holy light that guides you to your soul. I am the flame of love for which you yearn. I am the sun that will always return. Power of the sun, to honor you this night. Leap across the fire to keep all spirits bright. Power of the sun, fire in the night. Leave behind that which blinds to restore our sight.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the ParaX Radio Network. Now, the opening song tonight by Lisa Thiel was Lita, and because we'll be celebrating Midsummer, also known as Summer Solstice or Lita, in a couple of days, I figured it was a timely choice. Now, this is usually celebrated on June 21st, depending on the Earth's rotation around the Sun, and celebrates the arrival of summer, where the hours of daylight are the longest, and the sun is at its highest point before beginning to slide into darkness. And it's also a time of strong magic and empowerment, traditionally the time for hand fasting or weddings, and for communication with the spirits of nature. The veils between the worlds are thin, the portals between the worlds stand open, and it's an excellent time for rites of divination. Now, the rites of the ancients were kind of boisterous communal festivals with Morris dancing and singing and storytelling and pageantry, feasting, of course, and all done very close to the village bonfire. And there were also torchlit processions through the village after dark. And people believed that the fires possessed great power, and that prosperity and protection for oneself and one's clan could be earned merely by jumping over the bonfire. And it was also common for courting couples to join hands and jump over the embers of the fires 3 times to ensure a long and happy marriage, also financial prosperity, and of course many children. And even the charred embers from the bonfire possessed protective powers. They were charms against injury and bad weather in harvest time, and the embers were commonly placed around fields of grain and orchards to protect the crops and ensure an abundant reaping. Other customs included carrying an ember of the fire home and placing it in one's own hearth. So now that you've all heard about the Sabbath, I hope you all have a very blessed one. And that being said, my guest tonight, Carol Garr, knows all about Sabbaths and a whole lot of other things because she's been a Wiccan priestess for 20 years and is the author of Enchantment Encumbered, which is the study and practice of Wicca in restricted environments. She's been a volunteer in the Arizona State Prison System for more than 16 years and serves both on the Arizona Department of Corrections Religious Advisory Committee and as an active volunteer working directly with inmates in the study of Wicca. She's also the president of Mother Earth Ministries, and we'll be talking about all of the above in the upcoming hour. So, Carol, welcome to Stirring the Cauldron.
Thanks, Marla. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm really glad you're here, and I think I have to kind of start out with something a little bit that made me smile real big when we talked the other day. Because you referred to yourself as 3 things. Well, 3 things at that moment. A race car driver, a business owner, and a witch. Which, is a very colorful combination. And I loved the story about the symbol on the race car. So could you please tell the story of the pagan race car, and then we'll move on to the ministry and all the rest.
Okay. Yes, I drove for 2 years in NASCAR's entry, absolute bottom level of factory stock. My husband and I always enjoyed races, and I like going fast. And I went out to Tucson Raceway Park and had a car out there with a pentagram on the side. Because I was at that point coordinator of Tucson Area Wiccan Pagan Network, and one of my personal mandates from the goddess was to spread the truth about Wicca and try to dispel some of the misconceptions. I thought that it would be very appropriate to have Ton sponsor my car, among other places. I had a pentagram on the car, and I had information about Wicca in the pits. And it was a way to try to open the minds of some of the redneck fans of NASCAR. Mm-hmm. So I did it, and I was not one of the fastest cars. I didn't win any races, but I had fun, and I loved listening to the announcer trip over Tucson Area Wiccan Network when he had to read it over. The PA is one of my sponsors.
Yeah, isn't that fun? I do like kind of that little tweak. Okay, because you got to do it, and they can't get out of it. Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get out of it. They had to do it.
I know.
He hesitated, but he had to say it.
It's like he didn't go Wiccan, like that, or like some people might.
No, he had to read it, and I had been Wiccan for it was actually quite a bit more than 20 years, but it was years ago, and it was fun. So.
Well, it's one way to get it out there, and one way that people don't think about it getting out there, because we're always saying, well, have we crossed into mainstream yet? Well, that's a good question. In some areas we have, in some areas we haven't. But recently, as you mentioned on your website, like all nature-based religions are becoming more and more popular. And like many in the outside world, some prisoners have difficulty accepting mainstream beliefs for whatever reason and are looking for alternatives. And this is where Mother Earth Ministries come in, correct?
Yes. It started, I got into the prison ministry kind of backwards from what most people did. Most of them getting interested in helping for whatever reason and volunteer in the prison and go from there. In my case, I was contacted by the Director of Pastoral Services of the Arizona Department of Corrections because the department was being sued by a couple of Wiccan inmates because they were not being allowed to have Wiccan tools. And the reason they weren't allowed is because nobody knew what they were, and the general way that the department handled things they didn't understand was, if we don't know about it, no. So the inmates sued, and the department didn't know how to defend the lawsuit because they didn't know what the inmates were asking about. So I was, at that point, coordinator of TAWN, so I've always been very public. And so the director of the Pastoral Services found me somehow and called me and asked if I would consult with him, and I said, sure. He's in Phoenix, and I said, well, I'm in Tucson, and he was willing to come to me. He came to my house, and I showed him my altar, and I showed him the different tools and what they were, and told him what they were there for, and helped him come up with some religiously valid alternate tools that would not be a security threat for the inmates. And so it went from there. And then I was invited to speak to the Religious Advisory Committee, which I did, and then invited to join the Religious Advisory Committee, which I did. I was busy. I thought about, I don't really have time to drive around because we meet at different prisons around the state. At that time, it was every 2 months. Now it's every 3. But I felt that I couldn't say no. I had to make time. And so I did. And a few months later, he called me and said, there are inmates in Tucson who are asking if they could consult with a priestess. Do you know anyone? And I didn't know anyone. So I said, I'll go and see what I can do with them. And I went from there.
And the rest is
15 years ago.
and it keeps going.
It keeps going, and because I was not allowed by security rules to write to inmates, since there are inmates in other prisons besides Tucson, there are many facilities around the state, I kind of recruited my good friend, Ashleen Ogia, who is a published author, to do the letters to respond to inquiries from inmates that we were not able to get in to see. And also had some other friends, Don Davis, a friend of ours, he went in for several years to various prisons around the state. And that's where Mother Earth Ministries came from, was from the need to help the Wiccan and pagan inmates in Arizona to be able to practice and to understand how they can modify Wiccan practice even in the restricted environment of the prison.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know there were probably more obstacles than just the tools of the trade, as we should say. But I wrote myself a note during our conversation the other day, which now is almost unintelligible and completely out of context. So maybe you can help me decipher it, because I think it has to do with this. This is bad. But I wrote, there are more problems with the Wiccans themselves. Do you remember what that might have been referring to? Like, maybe we were talking about some of the obstacles being people who might have been anti-pagan or something and didn't feel it was appropriate.
Of that.
Yeah.
There's plenty of that. There was a whole lot more of that. When I first started going in, the chaplains had no idea about Wicca. First time I went into the prison, I kept hearing whispers from the corrections officers, the witch is on the yard, the witch is on the yard. And I got the feeling they were looking for my horns and tail. They didn't find it. But over the years, from speaking to the chaplains' meetings, I spoke to the state chaplains' meetings, and have met pretty well all of the chaplains in the state through my religious advisory committee office. I've been able to educate them. There's still prejudice. There are still some who have to bite their tongues, but they have to do their job. And they have now come to realize that Wicca is a valid religion, and it's not some shady guise for cults or devil worship or anything like that.
Right. Well, it's recognized by the armed forces as a religion that, you know, soldiers.
It wasn't back when I was
back then.
Started.
Yeah. Right.
Now we've made progress since then, nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a wonderful thing.
It's amazing. And you and I were kind of talking a little bit about, and you mentioned it just a minute ago, about tools that can and cannot be used and the kinds of substitutions. And talk about some of the things that cannot get through and some of the things that you use instead.
Okay, well, probably the top of the list is an athame, or also known as athame. Both pronunciations are considered correct, which is a ritual knife.
Yes.
They call it a shank in the prison. It's not. They're not going to allow them to have a knife. Period. The end.
Right.
So there are many alternatives you can use. Anything to direct energy, because an athame is never used to physically cut anything. It's simply to direct energy. And so, obviously, a wand, if it's a small stick, can use as a wand. They are allowed to have a cardboard athame, which I recommend that they don't use to try to direct too much energy, because as an energy worker, I find running energy through cardboard doesn't add anything. It dampens it. But it makes a good symbol on the altar. But the very simple solution to that is using their fingers.
Yes.
Because we are directing energy. And most people have fingers. So by pointing and grounding themselves first, which is one of the things that I teach them first, is connecting their energy to the earth and becoming a conduit to direct the energy where they point it. That's the first thing. Other things is when you're doing a circle or when you're creating an altar, you like to have symbols of all of the four elements to use. Air, we frequently have incense. They are now, didn't used to be allowed to have any kind of herbs, but they are now allow them a small number of herbs. But the simple solution for an air symbol is a feather. And they can find one of those on the yard where some nice bird donated it.
Right, right.
Water, it's nice to have a beautiful chalice, to have a shell to put your water in. A lot of these guys, they don't have that. Paper cup works, still a symbol of water, because you put water in it.
Right.
And when you're doing the blessing and you want to mix the salt and water, when they go to the chow hall, they get these little packets of salt. That works.
Yeah.
Now, they're allowed to order sea salt now, but if they don't have it, they can use the little salt packets.
Yeah.
And with fire, some of them draw a picture of fire. That works, too. Some of them find a little red stone. That works. Lots of alternatives that they can use.
That people wouldn't normally think about, because so many people just go by the book and have to be literal. And
inmates, not only they go by the book, but they don't know. They often don't know what book to buy, and they go by. There are a lot of good books out there, and there's a lot of what we call witch crap. And they don't know the difference, especially if they're beginning on this path. And if they come out of the traditional religions, as most people do, they've always been taught, well, if you do something wrong, it's a sin. And they're afraid to substitute. They don't know that it's okay. And they read a book and it says, do this. So, get this tool and this and this and this, and this is how you set up your altar. And they come and they tell me, well, I can't do circle because I don't have X, Y, Z.
Right.
And I said, the only thing that you absolutely can't do circle without is your will. And these are tools to help you. That's why we wrote that book, because we kind of got tired of being asked, what can we do instead of this? What can we do instead of this? Is this okay? Is this okay? I can't do this because. So we looked for a book that explained this, that really gave some strong alternatives, because a lot of the books do say, if you don't have this, then use something else. And then they go on and say, so go get this and this and this and this. So they don't really get it, that it's okay.
Yeah.
So we had to write Enchantment.
Which isn't so bad. And again, the title of the book is Enchantment Encumbered, which deals with the difficulties of not having the freedom to teach and do as you would have done under normal circumstances. And you mentioned that that book is going throughout the prison system across the country and even out of this country, yes?
Yes, and it kind of amazes me because we couldn't find a publisher who was willing to publish it because they didn't think it was marketable on a large enough scale to make it worth it for them. So we had to self-publish it. And in order to do that, we ended up where we don't have the marketing behind a normal publisher. So we're on Amazon, and we sell it on our website. And that's it. And somehow, by word of mouth and various publications that have talked about it, somehow a lot of these other prison systems have heard about it, and we get orders. We're selling maybe 1 to 2 a week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but to us it sounds like a lot.
Well, it is when it's consistent. It adds up,
It does add up, and we love it because it means that inmates elsewhere, and not just inmates, a lot of people don't think about the fact that there are a lot of other restricted environments besides prison, although prison's probably the most restricted. But hospitals frequently don't allow, say, burning incense because of fire codes or candles. Military bases sometimes don't allow certain things. And there are also, say, financial encumbrances. The inmates make 10 cents to 35 cents an hour But what about the people who are in a dorm, and the dormitories have rules, and they're a broke college kid, and okay, yeah, they've got a knife they can use. It's probably the same one that they use to cut their lunch meat, but they can't afford to go out and buy some fancy something. And so there are a lot of other encumbrances besides just the prison restrictions, and I think we could help all of them.
Well, absolutely. I'm curious, are there equal numbers of men and women who want to learn the ways of Wicca, or what's the breakdown?
Well, in Tucson, in the general public, we tend to have more women. But I've heard that there are other places that might have more men. It really draws women because a lot of other religions don't give women equal treatment. And the fact that Wicca has a feminine deity, we have the male deity too, but we have a feminine deity, so it really strengthens the connection that some women can feel with the goddess, and therefore draw them to Wicca. But we certainly have both, and I personally prefer to work with a balanced group because none of us got here without both a mother and a father, and I happen to like to work with the energies working together.
Yeah. So, you said that in your years of prison ministry, you've seen some very heartwarming changes in those who embrace this life path. Now, there may be some people out there who aren't completely familiar with Wicca. What do you and Wicca offer that allows for such positive change?
I think the most important is that people in prison are looked down on by society. They are frequently treated as less than human by at least some of the prison staff, and it really hits their self-esteem. And sometimes they act out in anger to defend themselves. But Wicca believes that we all are children of the goddess. And as such, all of us have a spark of sacredness within us. And just because somebody made stupid choices, they made bad choices and did some sometimes pretty horrible things, somewhere inside them they have that spark of sacredness. And the fact that I remind them of that spark is in everyone, that everyone is your brother and your sister. All of us, not humans, animals, plants, everyone is related and everyone is sacred. And if they can embrace that spark of sacredness within them, they can change and make better choices. So when I remind them, you can't do anything about what you did. You can put positive things on the positive side of the karmic ledger, but you can't change what you've done. But from this moment on, you can make better choices. And you can be a sacred being if you choose to be. That is a huge, huge change for the way that they can look at themselves and to hold out hope that they can be better.
Well, yeah, and I was going to bring that up, that in Wicca, respect for others and, again, responsibility for what we do is, top of the list and as you said, critical. And karma plays a very big part in it, and some of these inmates have some pretty bad karma attached to them, or they obviously wouldn't be in jail. It must be a very slippery slope to transgress this kind of thing at times.
It can be. I know that some of them have done some pretty ugly things, and I sometimes know what they've done. I I'm not supposed to ask, and I don't normally look it up, although you can find it. It's public information.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they tell me as ways of facing what they've done. We've done some very heavy rituals. I have done Samhain rituals with inmates who have murdered people, where they are ready to address and apologize the spirit of those who have passed over. And that's a heavy ritual.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Yes, and I warn them. I say, you don't know what that spirit's going to do. You don't know if they're going to be forgiving, or you don't know if they're going to cuss you up one side, down the other, or they don't want to say anything. They don't want to respond to you at all. They have to be ready for any of those responses before I'll do the circle with them.
Yeah.
We've had some interesting responses.
To say the least, you probably have. And for those that may not know, Samhain is one of the Sabbats, Halloween to the lay person, where we do revere the ancestors. We honor them. We call them. We talk to them. And that would be absolutely the perfect time to do it.
Yes, it's the time that the veil has been between the worlds. And it's a time where we do talk to spirits. So, perfect opportunity. And I still remember the one inmate who had killed a friend of his. It was a drunk driving incident. He had a friend that he called Coyote who was killed. And he was apologizing to Coyote, and we called the spirit, and he spoke. And, of course, these big grown men frequently will end up in tears in the circle because it's a safe place. And he did apologize, and as soon as he was done, a chorus of coyotes in the desert started to sing.
Oh, wow.
Had everybody's goosebumps going.
It's not surprising that happened, but and it's certainly not a miracle, but it's still, when something like that does happen, it catches your breath, if nothing else. But there's your validation, I mean, how else what better validation can you get than that? Yes,
it was very, very poignant to have that happen, and never know.
I could just see a couple of people that were probably looking around, looking for the nearest exit, because it probably also has a yike factor to it, too. But
well, except that everybody in that circle, they were our brothers in the craft, and they had been working in the circle, and they were prepared for what we were doing. So, no, if anyone had been observing, they would have certainly had a yikes factor.
Yeah, I was talking maybe the guards or somebody that was around. Now,
they weren't around.
Okay. I was going to ask, when you do some of these things, when you do, and we're going to talk about Sabbats in a minute, you don't have guards around then, for the most part.
No, not for the most part. Every prison system has different policies, but Arizona state prisons consider volunteers, and we have badges and have some basic training and all that, but they consider us volunteer staff.
Okay.
So we can supervise inmates. We, of course, are watched by the cameras. There are cameras everywhere. So we have supervision in that way. The control room officer is always able to keep an eye on us, and we have a radio to call in case there's a problem. But no, they're certainly are welcome, and I have frequently invited the chaplains to please come observe. They usually don't.
Do you kind of get the impression that those not in the know still kind of think that what you're doing has a little bit of relation to the devil or dark magic or things like that? I mean, do you still kind of feel that there's that undertone there?
Depends on who I'm dealing with. There are some people who, of course, I consider it brainwashing, but they've been programmed by some of the fundamentalist churches that it is something evil. But in today's world, with the amount of information that's out there in the general public, if someone thinks that we're devil worshippers, I consider that ignorance.
Oh, yeah.
Because the devil is not part of our pantheon. The devil is a Christian concept. So how are we worshiping something we don't believe in?
Exactly. I mean, we all, those of us in the know on this side of it, know that very well, but it's still hard to get things across to people that either don't know or don't want to know that
a lot of that latter.
that live with their misconceptions and happily. And when, I mean, the other thing that came to mind was in spellcasting. You know, you are teaching spellcasting. That's got to be hard too for people to say, oh my God, she's teaching them God knows what, you know, to curse people or to, you know, do whatever. That must also be something that you have to kind of tiptoe around carefully. Yeah.
I don't tiptoe. That one I take on right head on for a couple of reasons. First of all, I remind them, well, do you pray? Yes. The only difference between your prayer and my spell is you're asking God to do it, and I'm saying I'm taking the responsibility for doing it myself and just asking for aid from the gods, the elements, or whatever. That's the only... We're directing something to happen. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about, that really prayer is very, very similar to spellcasting. And as far as cursing, the threefold law, which I also remind these people who bring up concern about spells, says that whatever we put out there is going to come back to us 3 times. Now, that doesn't mean 3 times in this realm, but there is more than the physical world, and it will come back to us on many levels. So if you know you're going to wear something, wouldn't you really rather wear the good stuff?
Yes.
And again, that's something that people don't think about. So you tell them.
Well, yeah, and they don't know about it. They don't know, and ye harm none, do what ye will. You know, they don't know the difference between dark magicians, white magicians, anything like that. And I think a lot of people, the prejudice is still there because, you know, how many thousands of years or hundreds of years have we tried to live down the negative? They did a really good job of planting it to begin with. And so people don't want to know, you know, because people sometimes are kind of like sheep and they follow the pack. And if the whole pack says, well, this is bad, even though they know nothing about it, everybody else kind of goes along with it. There aren't probably, and I've said this before, there aren't probably as many free thinkers in our world than there should be.
That's true, but fortunately there are many, many more than there used to be.
Yes, and
even Hollywood is finally getting where not all witches are evil. Although there are far too many people who think that what's Hollywood is real. And even the more positive things, like something like Charmed, okay, there's some good stuff in there. But are we just what you see on TV? No.
No, and that's the interesting thing, because I always say that there are as many types of witchcraft as there are people that practice. And a lot of people don't have the label of Wicca or Santeria or whatever, because a lot of people take the best of a lot of different worlds, so they're eclectic. And
Well,
you have
another thing, that brings something up, is that a lot of people don't really distinguish witchcraft and Wicca. And
Right.
they're very different. Pretty well, all Wiccans are witches in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many kinds of witches, because witchcraft is simply the practice of magic, which is manipulation of natural forces by force of will.
Right.
And there are all sorts of magicians, some of whom don't even have a religion. You don't have to be a witch, to be a magician. And some have varying different religions, of which Wicca is a subset of paganism, and there are even many kinds of pagans and many kinds of Wiccans.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to keep their definitions straight, and it can get kind of confusing sometimes.
It can, and I always say when there is confusion, please ask. Don't assume.
Yes.
that seems to be the easiest way. Now, I've got a question from the chat room. Ceiling Cat is asking, what is the return rate of those prisoners who use Wicca? Does it make a difference in their life so that they don't return to jail?
I have seen some really amazing lives turned around. I don't have any statistics on the return rate. There are some who come to ritual just like they come to Christian services or Jewish services or Muslims or whatever, that come because they got nothing better to do in prison and it's a nice distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, the religion isn't going to change the way they look at the world because they don't want to change.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen a few of our guys that I've observed the change. And that's been heartwarming from people who say, well, what I did didn't hurt anybody because all I did is steal from this, that, or break into... I had one who broke into vending machines, and he said, I didn't hurt anyone. I said, well, what about the person who depended on that for their rent money or their mortgage or their medicine for their kid? He'd never thought about that.
Uh-huh.
By the time he got out of prison, this guy's whole worldview changed.
Mm-hmm.
That's someone that isn't going to come back.
Right.
And he's not back. I've had others who have told me how when they came in, they were really bad people. That if you met them 20 years, 30 years down the road, because sometimes I work with guys that have been in a very long time, and you'd never guess that they were like that because they were changed. Those are the ones we really make a difference. So, unfortunately, I don't have any stats. They have not run those kind of statistics, at least not in Arizona, comparing recidivism with the different religious groups, although it might give me an idea to ask and see if that could be done.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and the results would probably be very, very positive. And you've had such good results. I mean, you were telling me this story about the man who was passing over. Was that the lifer that stopped dialysis?
Yes.
Tell everybody that. I mean, just proves that, again, validation that this is a good thing.
Well, I worked with this man for about 8 years in the prison. He had kidney failure because of actually it was prescribed medication that damaged it. It wasn't something he had taken illicitly, but he was on dialysis for the whole time I knew him, and I'd been working with him. And he finally got to the point where he had a life sentence, and he said, it's not worth it anymore. He says, I'm going to stop dialysis.
Mm.
So I started counseling with him about that to make sure he was really ready to pass over. And one day he told me, he said, you know, I'm in here for something I didn't do, but I belong in here. And I asked him about that, and he said, well, I did a lot of really bad things, and I hurt a lot of people. He was a meth dealer. He was making and selling methamphetamines. This guy had been dealing drugs as a family business since he was 5 years old when he started helping divide the marijuana for his family.
Wow.
So he was raised in this. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I didn't do that crime, but I belong in here. He said, with all the people I've hurt, I belong in here, and I think this is part of my karma.
Mm.
He did die in prison. He decided to stop his dialysis. And I did one of the most amazing rites that I think I've ever done as a priestess. We did a passing rite for him while he was still alive. And I introduced him to the goddess of the crossroads, Hecate. And it was just amazing. He was so ready to go. He was at peace. He knew he'd made his choice, and he was ready to move on. It was just an amazing circle.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, and you know, who says that people can't change? I mean, they can, even though maybe very basically, people say, well, you know, DNA is always there, you can't change that, or, you know, the leopard can't change your spots for good. But when you get, I was going to say, when you get into spirituality,
you can make different choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, even some of the people in the pagan community have been kind of shocked that I have worked with sex offenders. And yes, I will go in and work with sex offenders. Some people are going to be attracted to inappropriate sex objects. It curdles my blood to think about child pornography and molestation and rape, but you can. I mean, I'm married. I can go out and see some sexy guy, and I can admire the sexy guy, but I'm not going to go and jump in bed with him because I'm happily married. Somebody who has an attraction that's socially unaccepted doesn't have to give into it. They can say, I know this is not appropriate, and so I'm not going to do that. If he can make that choice, he's no longer a danger to society. And what I'm telling him is make better choices.
That's something we all need to do. I mean, you know, from the very simplest level to the most, the heaviest level. We all need to make better choices. None of us are innocent of, you know, sticking foots in it and tripping and doing silly things. It just happens. But as a blanket thing, I think being able to minister to people that need it and make the changes. Not everybody is going to change, as you said. So there are people that are changeable, there aren't. But helping one person, helping two people, doing the best we can do to help others.
Yes.
If you can afford even the slightest change, it's a blessing. It's absolutely a blessing.
And not only thinking about the one or two or however many you can help change is, what are they going to do? If I can help someone look at the world in a better way and deal with the others out there in a better way, who are they going to change? Who are they going to influence positively instead of hurt? And it spreads.
Yeah. Tell one, then, you know, tell 100, because it will. It's like that old commercial. Boy, I'm dating myself. But, you know, tell somebody, and so on and so on and so on, and it multiplies. And
Have you ever seen that? I've seen it done on TV a few times, and I've actually been part of it, where they have the candle lighting ceremonies where you start the light in the center and everybody lights the candle off of it, spread it into this huge group until you get this amazing glow of candlelight.
Yeah.
And you can do that spiritually as well.
Exactly. And that's what we need to do. I mean, we need to get out there and sometimes instead of talking about it, doing. And you are definitely doing more than a lot of people would, or you're going into that uncharted territory in a sense where very few would dare to tread.
Well, I feel that because I am in a position, nobody can fire me. I have my own real estate company. Someone is not to work with me, but that's their choice. But I have that security. I'm certainly a mature person, so nobody's going to think that I'm some 15-year-old hippie. And I'm an established member of the community, and I can go out there and say, yeah, I'm all these things, and I'm a Wiccan priestess. And they can look at that, and maybe the next time they meet some other Wiccan out there, they're going to think, oh, yeah, there's this woman out there I met, and she wasn't real weird, so maybe they won't look at other, this newer person, this person who might not be in quite such a secure situation. Maybe it'll help them, and we've seen that in Tucson. When I first started as TON coordinator, when we had public, especially Samhain rituals, the press showed up every time. And they would come in, the witches are in the park. And the first time they didn't show up, I had mixed feelings. It was kind of weird. They didn't show up. And the first thought is, wow, we're becoming mainstream. That's really cool. And but our free publicity went away. But now we get put into the religion section of the newspaper.
There you go.
When we're having rituals. And that's wonderful.
Inroads. And you said, and we're running out of time, but I do want to bring this up. You a couple of days ago, or you did your first Nita ritual, yes?
First one this year.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah.
For Leah, yes. But yeah, I did one in the prison because it was. I go in once a month to each of my units, and I went to this one, and we did a really nice ritual to honor the sun at the height of its power. We see that as the sun god manifestation, and we celebrate the strength and the brilliance of light. But then we also, on the other side, is there's only one way to go from the top. And if he's at the height of his power, that means it's going to start to decline. And that's okay. That's taking us from the growth cycle and beginning into the decline toward the harvest cycle. And we in Wicca see everything as a cycle.
Yes.
Not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with the fact that we're on a down cycle. There's nothing wrong with the fact that I'm now a crone. And I'm not saying, well, I wish I was 20 again or 30 or 40. No, I'm enjoying this phase of my life. And I think that it's important to look at the cycle as perpetual. And what goes up is going to come down, and what goes down is going to come up, and that's just the way life works.
Exactly. How can people help Mother Earth Ministries?
Well, obviously, if you're interested in our book, Enchantment Encumbered, I think it actually encompasses, it has a concise history, it has glossaries, it has some book reviews, and it has a book of shadows. So that it can go through how you can do some basic rituals, some spells, things like that. Spells to work on yourself, not on other people, because never, never, never work on someone without consent.
Exactly.
Real important. So buying the book, at least at this point, Ashleen and I have not taken any royalties from this book. All of it goes to benefit Mother Earth Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on our website, motherearthministries.org. We also have a donation button there for anybody who would like to contribute. We're hoping to be able to produce a video of a ritual. We'd like to do, and we're willing to do the ritual, but we don't have the capacity to actually make this up and make CDs so that we can donate them to the prisons, so that people can actually see a ritual in action if they don't have one of us volunteers there.
Exactly. So any of you videographers out there, get in touch with Carol.
Yes, we'd love that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we do network with other prison ministries. You can write to us. There's a button on our website to connect with Ashleen. She goes by scribe at motherearthministries.org. And if someone has any information, or if you are part of a prison ministry or a chaplain somewhere, we do give discounts on the book. You'd have to get hold of us, and we have a discount code, and you can order it directly through our publishing website. And that way we help others that go out and do the kind of work that we're doing.
Perfect. Well, Carol, it was a pleasure having you join me tonight, and many blessings to you for all the good work you do, and all that Mother Earth Ministries is doing as well.
Well, thank you so much, Marla. I appreciate the opportunity, and we welcome questions, and I hope that we can spread the light of harmony and balance out into the world.
So mote it be.
Well.
So mote it be. And thank you all for listening in tonight. And until next time, everyone, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Martha Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2013. Moonlight Haw by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.